Welcome to session 2. I am Brian Jody, the college pastor here at A&M United Methodist Church. I got Chris Field. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name's Chris Field, and I'm a member of the congregation. Our family has been here about 3 years now, a little more. And I'm a former pastor, and about 12 years ago, my wife and I started a nonprofit ministry in Ghana, Africa, to help rescue children out of human trafficking.
Awesome. So we're going to go through Mark 4, 1, 8 through 8:26. So in this, we're looking at a lot of parables. Sower and the seed, all the really, really good ones. Also some obscure ones that, we kind of like gloss over and don't really talk about on Sundays. But we're going looking at Christ's word and the parables. Just what stood out to you in this section of reading?
I think one of the things is how well Jesus uses stories to try to connect with people. And it's a reminder that, even now, what a powerful way to make deeper connection with people. That Jesus was constantly finding ways to connect what the people knew and what they were experiencing in their lives to make those deeper spiritual connections. And also, these parables are confusing. There's ones that you're reading it, and even if you have a background in theology, and it doesn't matter how many degrees you have, it's like, what is exactly happening here? And for me, it's such a reminder of the mystery of God, that God was never meant to be contained in a small box or even a large box, that if we don't feel some sort of mystery around God, that we're probably simplifying things that are actually sometimes pretty complex. What about you?
Yeah, that was one of the things that obviously I stood up right at the beginning of the parable of the sower. I can't tell you how many different ways we have looked at the sower, whether we're the sower, we're the seed, we're the ground, all these different things, and how complex it is to speak to where we are in our lives. And how many theologians have just gone over it and just oh, well, we can take it this way, this way, this way, this way, this way. And some of these parables, are, the lamp under a bushel is pretty plain, right? Like, hey, we're not going to hide who we are. We're not going to do all these things. We need to be this light for other people around. Where other parables are just so shrouded and just we can take it 800 different ways, and each way we see a new way to God, and those kind of things.
Yeah.
So which one really gets you? Which parable really just sticks out to you and just really connects with you as Chris?
Yeah, I think the parables for me that are the most compelling are always going to be the ones that are reminding God's people that our job as God's people is to go out and do good in the world. And it's one of the things I love that this section, as we'll get to, that it connects to Jesus' miracles alongside the teachings. Because Jesus always, that human element was never missing. And I think sometimes in church and in our faith, we can be so focused on getting the text right, so focused on getting the sort of the order of operation right, and we can miss that Jesus was always drawing us back to people, everything that was ever happening. And so I don't know that it was one specific parable, but just I love that there's a human element to every story Jesus tells, and it's always ushering us into deeper, more loving, connected relationship with the people around us.
Right. Yeah, and I like how this section it kind of has almost 3 points, right? It has these stories, and in between these stories, he's doing these radical healings too, right? Bringing a girl back from the dead, all these things. And then even in between that, he's also talking to the disciples, and he's just hey, this is why I'm doing it.
Yeah.
And they're watching him do it, and man, I don't know how. And it's I read scripture, I'm just he just told you.
Right.
He just told you,
totally.
Hey, all this stuff is happening. But then we do, and I think in real life too, we have the scripture, we have read, we've gone through UBS, we've gone through church and all these things, but then we hit real life, and we do see God move.
Yeah.
And we're man, how can this happen?
Right.
What are some things that you see from the disciples as we work through these miracles, as we work through these stories and things like that?
I think the one story that stood out to me that was most compelling was in Mark 5, when you read this carefully, this story of this guy that is like literally, he's so wild that they chain him up, right? And we just kind of gloss over that. So it's like normal. It's like, hold on. They literally say they chain his hands and his feet, and the chains can't even stop him. So, like, I'm thinking about the older brother in, Sloth in Goonies. If anybody's ever seen the movie Goonies, it's like, they chain this guy up, and even the chains can't hold him. He breaks the chains. It says he wanders through the graves and the hills at night, just like crying out and cutting himself with stones. He sees Jesus from a long ways away. He runs up to Jesus. I get the image in my head that he sprints up, kind of huffing and puffing, out of breath, falls at Jesus' feet, and then it says he yells as loud as he can, which is, if you've ever had somebody yell as loud as they can, it's pretty unnerving. And so here's this guy who's been rejected in every way. He runs up, screams at Jesus at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me?" And Jesus says to him, "What is your name?" And like that moment for me to humanize this man who's been dehumanized, to chain someone up is to dehumanize them, to say we can't trust you. To send them out into the hills is to dehumanize, get out of our community, right? All of the things that he had done to him, probably by religious people, probably for they would say for their own safety, right? They would say, well, he's a danger to us. We don't know, he's unpredictable, whatever. And for the first thing for Jesus to do, before he does anything else, just say, "What's your name?" To me, it just, as I read this text, I just kept thinking, like, gosh, like that's it. Like that's a story for me that epitomizes the graciousness of Jesus in just that one sentence. Names matter, right? Like a name is something you're given at birth. It's usually a proud moment for a mom and dad. There's nothing more human and sweet than a precious little baby. And so to ask that man, like, "What's your name?" It's just like Jesus is saying, you are human. You are human. You have a name, and your name matters. Before I even get into what's going to happen next, I just want to remember together and my disciples to see that you have a name and you are a person. So, man, that one got me. I love that one. What was your favorite?
Yeah, well, and just on that one, like I love the section where he's dead, right? Like he's in this graveyard.
Yeah. So
like Christ doesn't go to the center of the city. Christ doesn't go anywhere. He goes and meets this guy among the dead, and this this guy with these demons in him. He calls his name out, which is phenomenal. Like I've not really thought about it that way, but just like gives him a name and then pulls him from the grave. Right, like pulls him back into the society that has pushed him out, and has marginalized him and things like that. I also love that story, but I do. The parable of the sower is always one of those ones that even today, when I was thinking about it, I've heard it 1,000 different ways, and then I just thought about kind of the seasons of my life, right? The seasons of my life where like I was hardened. I was like the path, I was hardened. Like there was nothing getting in because I was not ready to receive it, right? And then just working through those of like having temptations in my life that kind of choke out what I want to see God do in my life, and then having the shallow stuff where it's just like, oh yeah, I mean like the seed is almost there, but I'm just not taking care of myself and taking care of like my spiritual self to be like planted with this seed. So I always love like all the different ones, but like right now especially, just in this season where I do feel like I've kind of taken care of like spiritually all the different ways that God is like trying to put seeds in my life. It's like, hey, this is here, especially with every college student that comes in. It's just like because I am a big component. I have a big component of like not saying that I know all the answers. So like I don't know is a good answer. And then having college students come up, and I'm just like, man, I hope I'm ready for whatever they bring me, right? And I hope that it's not, hey, Brian, you're a college pastor, you have to say more than I don't know. But with all that stuff going on, how God is just like moving in and around us at all times. It's a really cool, just like visual and how ministry is flowing here.
And I think this church, I mean, to the ministry we do, you do, to college students, that story of seeds feels so especially meaningful because they're not planting roots here. The intention is not that they're going to grow here. The intention is actually that they will be the seed that goes out into the world and that they'll be a healthy seed, healthier than when they came here.
Right.
And that's a church that is sending out is making a different commitment than a church that's sort of locked the doors and said, stay here, you're not allowed to leave, right? There's a lot of faith that has to come in constantly pouring yourself into fruit that you'll never actually bear.
Right.
And that's hard work, but it's beautiful work because it really does mean we could point to, I know you have students and there are students who've come through this church literally all over the world that are better people of faith and more godly, Christ-like people wherever they find themselves because of the work and the seeds this church gave to them for those 4, sometimes 5, 6 years.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's a beautiful thing. When you read the stories about the disciples sort of missing it,
right?
Oh, I mean, if you're honest and you read through Mark, it's like, Jesus is like, okay, let me tell you a different way. And the disciples like, hold on, do you mean? And Jesus is like, that's exactly what I mean. And then, a half a chapter later, they're like, wait, does this mean? And Jesus is like, yes, that's still what this means. It's like the disciples continue to sort of miss a lot of what Jesus is laying down.
Right.
What's your take on that as somebody who also is trying to follow Jesus?
Right. When we look at this, man, I see humanity.
Yeah.
Right. Because I do see these wild stories that Christ is trying to lay down this knowledge, and even pulls the disciples aside and it's like, hey, this is why I'm telling.
Yeah.
This is why I'm telling these stories. Like, do you understand? And I'm like, yeah, we do. And then he goes and tells another story, and he's like, oh, I don't get that one then. Right. And it is like this. And then they're seeing these amazing miracles, and sometimes it gives me hope, right? I was just like, man, when I stumble or when I mess up and stuff like that, not that like I use it all the time, but I'm like, man, I listen to these disciples, I'm like, why don't you get it? But then I look at myself in the mirror, I'm like, yeah, why don't you get it?
Yeah.
Right? Because God is more ever present now than he was, back in the day, and we're just living in this world where God is moving. Why do we continue to kind of slide back into this? We're surprised that God moves, and we're surprised that God is moving in this way, in this time, in this period, kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So I do see myself in those things.
Yeah, I think for me, it's such a reminder that although we've at times tried to simplify what it means to be a follower of Jesus, this is hard.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's hard. It is so countercultural.
Right.
It is so upside down, choosing that third way when the world says you have to go left or right, you have to go up or down, and Jesus constantly says, no, there's another way, there's another way, there's another way. But this is hard. It's hard to lay down your life for other people. It's hard to not think of yourself. It's hard to invite the other in. It's hard to go out into a graveyard and to ask a guy who cuts himself what his name is, right? This is hard stuff. And so I think that it's a reminder to me that I agree 100% with you that we should be more gracious to ourselves at times, that what we're trying to do is pretty tough. And I think the other thing that I kept thinking is this should be uncomfortable.
Right.
And if we find ourselves not being uncomfortable in our faith, we're probably missing something.
Right.
And if it feels too easy, or if it feels like, oh, we did that, I got that, let me check the list again, yep, I'm fine. It's like, no. If it feels that easy, we're probably missing something.
Right.
Because here are the people literally in the shadow of Jesus, following him around, watching him do crazy stuff, and they're still like, sorry, I have a quick question. Yeah, like that feels true. And so for us to read it from afar and be like, oh yeah, we got this. Like, this isn't confusing. We're done already. This is so easy. Like, if we do that, and I've done that in my faith, and you've probably done that, everyone watching this has probably done that at some point. When we do that, I think we should step back and say, whoa, how long has it been since I've been uncomfortable in my faith? How long has it been since I've asked myself hard questions? and gone back and re-examined some of what I believe to be true. And that's the dance,
Yeah.
right? That's why this is a lifelong relationship that God continues to invite us into.
Right.
You know, it's not a one-time moment, and it's not one Sunday, it's not one small group, it's not one text. This is something we get to do with God our whole lives, and that mystery it's an incredible gift, but it's also uncomfortable, and
Right.
I think that's okay.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think it's time for us to stop talking and
Great.
make everybody talk in the room.
Perfect.
So I'm so glad that you sat down and we got to do this together. It was a great time. I hope that you still have plenty of time in your small group to have conversations and things like that as you go through questions. But thanks for joining us.